All this week, our subject has been what makes Sweden tick? How does its government work? What do the people think? And we thought we'd end this week with three people that we chose sort of at random, everyday folk off the street, to get their idea of how their country is working, where it's headed. Peggy Bruzelius is 38 years old. She's executive vice president of a financial services company here in Stockholm, married. She has a son of 5 years old, right?
Right.
Ole Johansson is 30, a bachelor, works as a commodities trader. And Cecilia Bengtsson is 21 years old, the next generation, a university student and part-time waitress. Peggy, let me start with you. We have talked so much this week about the tax system, and government officials talk so matter-of-factly about the fact you can pay 60, 75, 80% in taxes. Do people really accept that as much as they seem to?
Officially they do. I think most people, at least people who work full-time, dislike it. I also think there is a lot of tax evasion going on. There are different estimates about the black sector. That means untaxed labor.
Black market, underground economy, yeah.
And it's definitely substantial.
Yeah, but no tax revolt. I mean, the government that has, you know, had the taxes escalating all these years, still in power.
Yeah, but you know, the Swedes are not revolutionaries. I think that's part of the answer.
It seems so strange to Americans, though, with those kinds of taxes and that big a governmental sector that's way over 50%, for instance, of the gross national product. Do you get return? That's the question. I mean, for instance, everybody talks about the daycare centers, but I have seen statistics that say that the cost per child of daycare is up around $9,000.
I think that's an excellent example. I, like most Swedes, am for daycare, and I think it should be reasonably priced so that people can afford it. But what Swedes always do is they look at the fees for the daycare center. They don't look at the total cost, what they actually pay through their taxes. And I think that's an excellent example of public sector inefficiency.
Well, you're a businessman. A businessman stopped me in the street the other day and said, what you don't realize is to make any money in this country, you have to leave. Is that true?
Well, I would say it's partly true and it's not true. Like Peggy said, there are ways to make money in Sweden, but if you're an employee, it's virtually impossible. There are two ways, basically, in Sweden to strike it rich. That is to have your own company, so you can do tax planning or tax evasion. What you call it depends on what side of the fence you're on. Or win something on the state lottery of Sweden.
Yes, everybody plays the lottery here. I mean, that's sort of a national fascination here. I guess it is in the United States, too, as the prizes get bigger and bigger, but it really is quite a thing here. One of the other things that I've noticed is how homogeneous a nation this is. I mean, everybody the same church, same government party for so long. That would seem very strange, I think, to most Americans. Is it continuing that way, or is there a large influx of immigrants coming to Sweden?
I wouldn't say it's a large influx. There is an influx of immigration. I mean, Sweden would not have survived without the immigration into this country. And we have a lot to thank the immigrants. But most of them have assimilated into the Swedish way of living. You know, it's not the kind of melting pot as you have in the United States. I described Sweden once as the very well-kept suburb of the Western world. Like you say, when you come here, you think it's clean, it's safe, it's wealthy, and it's so, you know, everyone virtually the same race, the wealth.
Well, but the point was that with a nation that's very homogeneous, it is easier to pay taxes because you're paying for your neighbor and whatever. But as people start to come in from outside the country and begin to live on the welfare system, that there begins to be some resentments that creep in, and somebody told me that is beginning to happen in Sweden.
Well, it could be true. I mean, because of course, I think not from that sense, but I think people traveling, going abroad on exchange programs and so forth, they come out and they see, you know, more high works in other places, and that I think is, you know, has a big influx in Sweden today.
Cecilia, I talked about you as the next generation. Tell me a little bit about the educational system, because again, it seems strange to Americans. College, you've just gotten through college, right? Or are getting through college?
I'm getting through.
Yeah, all free, right?
All free. Or the fees, you don't have to pay any fees for going to university or going to school before university, but you pay for your books while you're at university level. Of course, you pay for your food and somewhere to live,
With
but no school fees at all.
With totally free education, is there enough room for everybody who wants to go to school?
There is, I would say.
Really?
Mm.
No overcrowding or no more applications than there are places?
There are, but if you really hold on to something, if you really want to study something, I would say that you can do it. And also because if you want to study one subject, you don't follow a line. If you want to study, like I do, a language, the system of getting into university is that it's like a tombola system there as well. If you know everything you have to do, if you have enough grades to do this, you put all the names together, as I understand, and then they pick a couple of names, and if you're lucky, you get in. And then you just try the next year if you don't.
The prime concern for every college graduate in America, a lot of kids about to graduate, is what am I going to do? What job am I going to have? Is that the prime concern for college graduates here, or are there other things more important?
It is probably, but also I think it's important what you do in your spare time as well, that you have a good way of living, that you have a high quality of living, that you have time off, that you can be in the nature, see your friends. And that's very important as well, I think.
General question to all of you. With as much money going into the government as there is here, do Swedes expect perfection out of their system? I mean, do they expect the government to be able to do it and do it right?
I think we do, and we feel we have the right to do it because we pay for it. But I think we have a tendency to be more critical against our government than most other countries.
Would you agree with that, Olle?
No.
No?
I think we're coming to that, but I think Sweden as a people is very manageable. That's my opinion. I think that, it's almost like if we're told something, we do it. We don't object. It's like you're asking for, it's got to be some tax revolution. We don't have any revolutions. If the government says so, yes, okay, we'll do it,
Other thing that Americans think so much about Sweden, we are immediately struck by the very open attitudes towards sex. Sex education starts so early in this country, very open about premarital sex. Do Swedes really have a different attitude? Cecilia, you're in school, do they?
I would say we're more relaxed about being naked, being without clothes, because for the first thing, because we live close to nature in the summer. If you want to go swimming, for instance, you go somewhere to a beach and you don't have to go to a crowded beach. If you go with a couple of friends, you don't have to have any bathing suit perhaps, and it's just natural. It's nothing special. If you go swimming in a swimming pool, you all change together, you show your body, even if you're fat, you're skinny, or you don't care, you sit in the sauna together. And that's one thing that I think is more relaxed here, perhaps.
A different attitude on it?
I think she's right about it, but I think we are, this impression that the rest of the world have, that we have free sex and all that, I think it was more than that it started early, in the 60s, Now I think it's the contrary. I mean, if you go out here, if you go to the United States, I think there is a big porno industry thriving, and it's not here in Sweden because it's not so exciting. You see what I mean?
Cecilia, just a couple seconds left. Drugs, drinking, so much a concern about young people in the United States, much in this country.
I would say that we have a good way of getting information at school, starting from a very early age. So drugs is really, if you think about drugs, taking drugs, you don't think about doing it for one time, because that would be the first step towards the gutter. It's not like alcohol.
Cecilia, Olle, Peggy, great pleasure to have you with us this morning. Thanks for coming in. Very interesting. It's been nice to be here in your country. 23 after, we'll be right back. 25 minutes after the hour, we continue our discussion with three private citizens here in Sweden about their country, Peggy Bruzelius and Olle Johansson and Cecilia Bengtsson. Nice to have you all with us this morning. I want to ask, let me start with you, Peggy. You run into a lot of Americans over here. My goodness, they're all over the place, tourists and whatever. What misconceptions do you think Americans most have about Sweden?
I think the most common misconception is that they confuse social democrat with socialist. A lot of Americans think that Sweden is a socialist country, which it's not. It's a capitalistic country with a very large public sector and very high taxes, but that's something very different.
Olle, how about you? What misconceptions do you most find?
I don't think Americans have many misconceptions because they don't know anything about Sweden. You can't have any misconceptions about things you don't know anything about. So, right.
You just find a woeful ignorance, do you?
Not ignorance, it's just, since we have this saying, when United States sneeze, we get pneumonia, because it means United States is like the motor of the world economy. And, but you certainly wouldn't notice that much if we just drop down in the Baltic Sea. You would look, what happened to my spare parts, to the Volvo and Saab. That was about the only thing.
I would suspect that you immediately feel that in the commodities business. Certainly, the interrelation of markets in this
Well,
world.
of course, the people that I work with, they are well aware of what Sweden is and the rest of the world. I mean, the people who need to know, of course, know. I'm talking about the general American.
No, yes. But I'm saying the interrelation of markets, so when the American markets get in trouble, I would suspect you feel that.
Oh, yes,
quickly
we feel
over
that very much indeed.
Cecilia, how about you? When you run into Americans?
Well, the first question I normally get is, what about the suicide rate? Is it true that you have such a high percentage of suicides? And that's the thing I hadn't heard before I left this country and met people from other...
And you spent a year in China, right?
Yes, I did.
How about the Chinese? Do they know much about Sweden?
I think they know more than most people.
Is that right?
They have a lot of good TV programs about different countries in the world, and they are interested in the Western world, very interested in Americans, for instance.
Americans are funny because they can criticize the United States. But when an American runs into somebody from overseas who starts criticizing our country, they immediately get very defensive and very patriotic. Same thing of Swedes?
No, I think it's the contrary. Swedes are very modest. And we have a tendency, even if deep down we love our country, we're very proud of it, but whenever we meet foreigners, we start talking about all the negatives, about the tax system, about the government, rather than telling them about all the nice things. So I think we're very much the opposite to the Americans in that.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Olle, do you agree?
No, again. No,
We got something going here.
I think Peggy's right in the sense I can sit and criticize. But if you start to criticize, I've heard myself protect the Swedish tax system. I've heard myself doing things, and I think, why am I saying these things? And it's the protection, as you say.
Cecilia, how about you?
I would say we criticize among ourselves, talking to another Swede, but once leaving the country, meeting other people, we're so proud.
Yeah. Well, students are that way, I think, generally. I mean, no group is probably more critical than students. But again, when you get with students from other countries, you immediately get very patriotic. I think that gets very strong. You're going to do what? Do you have any idea yet? I asked you about what the prime concern of students is. Do you have any idea what you're going to do?
What I'm going to work with?
Yeah.
I would like to become an architect, if I could.